Okay, welcome to Thrivecast, a community podcast series where we are learning from the biggest of the bigs, learners in the growth and engineering space. Our today's topic is building virality into product, and to do justice, we have Brian Paget. Brian, am I saying your name right? Paget?
Brian Paget, but Paget,
Oh,
yeah.
Brian Paget.
But
Okay.
it's like Page with a T. People spell it and say it all different ways, so you can say it however you want. But Paget
Okay.
is yeah.
All
My
right. Okay.
wife, who wants to always say it Paget, by the way, because she comes from Lebanon and they speak French there. But it's an English name, so we say it Paget.
Yeah, it reminds me of the car company Peugeot, and which is why it's
Peugeot.
getting a little company.
Yep.
Um, cool. So with Brian Paget, who's got a storied career working across a range of products. Brian, you worked in the industry across big and small companies. You've been a
Yep.
former strategy, technology, and marketing exec, and at Amazon, SAP, Adobe, IBM, and so many venture-backed startups. Brian, welcome to Thrivecast.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Before we start talking about the product virality, and maybe I wanted to have the listeners to know a little more about your background and how you got started to build Meetmoji. Maybe a small anecdote before we kick off
Yep.
there. Brian, you and I, we connected during our market research call, and you made a statement that kept ringing in my head. You said freemium is the luxury of the venture-backed companies, and
Yes.
that's the moment I knew that I got to invite you for the podcast. I got to learn so many things from you.
Yeah.
Looks like you've been there, done that. So tell us about your background and why did you decide to start building Meetmoji?
Yeah, sure. Appreciate it, and hopefully I'll have some more anecdotes. But I did learn the freemium model at the largest freemium company in the world, Adobe. So I'm very familiar with that model. But by background, I started off my career. I was a developer, so computer science degree. My dad was actually a software guy. He was a fighter pilot, then ended up working at Lotus, which was a storied and large software company way back in the day. And so I grew up learning software and learning things like OS2 and how to program from all the engineers at Lotus at the time. And so I was bitten early by the computer bug, got a computer science degree, got out, was a developer. I live in Washington, D.C., so I started off in the defense market. And I stumbled on to playing around with a piece of technology, and that company ended up hiring me. And that started my career of about
Hmm.
20 years in software. So, like you said, my formative years, my first years were kind of as a sales engineer, as part of the venture-backed startups. And then I met my wife, and she told me to get a real job. So I went to work for IBM, you know, as it goes. So I went from being a sales engineer to a salesperson at IBM. And then, really my heart was still in technology, went back to Adobe. I spent 10 years at Adobe, kind of rose the ranks there, and ended up as deputy CTO for the public sector. Um, that's where I started to, we were talking a little bit before, but that's where I started to do a lot of public speaking, marketing, webinars, internal enablements, everywhere from the Sydney Opera House to some cheap motel in the middle of Pittsburgh somewhere, right? But I would do a lot of those things. And then, went to SAP after that, spent 5 years there, chief strategy and marketing officer, and led our entire marketing team from internal, in person events to online and back to hybrid. And then after that, went to Amazon, ran solutions worldwide for public sector there, and had my midlife crisis where I came home with my wife and said, "Hey, look, I'm 45, and this is the time to go back to the small place. Remember, I did all those big companies for you in between." So I started Meetmoji about 6 months ago, 7 months ago now, with the intent to try to solve some of the issues that I saw in trying to, move events from in person to online and back to hybrid. And, tired of stitching together tools and not having the things I wanted to. So I figured I'd go out and try to build it on my own. So I've been doing that for the last, 7 months or so.
Oh, congratulations on being a startup founder.
Yeah, thank you.
Across your background, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and as we had the conversation earlier as well, you touched upon you went from sales to GTM to understanding how things work. You were at the SAP venture partner group or the venture investment group, where
Yep.
looks like you also went ahead and acquired a couple of companies and you learned from them. and now you get to do all the things that you asked them to do, right? And like
Exactly.
you were the one who's running due diligence on some of these companies, and now you're on the other
Right.
side building things. And
Yeah.
those puny guys, they were like, okay, Brian, I'm going to get you. So look
Yeah.
forward for that. So tell us a little about Meetmoji, and how did you start thinking about Meetmoji? What was the foundational aspect of Meetmoji, that foundational aspect of this particular idea that caught your attention? Why did you go start building it? And then, and maybe, you know, uh, talk a little about how you want to take this to the market with making the product viral.
Yeah. So, I'll start off a little bit further back on what you mentioned. My time at NS2. So, I've done every job in software. I've been an engineer, developer, a product manager, a product marketer, CMO, a CTO, chief strategy officer. But I've never started anything from scratch. And you're dead on. I'm running I'm working with our M&A team, and I'm helping to run acquisitions for companies or minority investment stakes that we would take. And I was giving a lot of advice to a lot of these founders and trying to shape it. And it's so funny now looking back. It's like a lot of my advice really wasn't that good because I had never done it before. So that was part of the journey in the beginning. It's like I knew I wanted to start something, but because of my background in product marketing, product management, and kind of go to market stuff, as you have a great background there too, I really started to research, where are areas that people are, really investing in. What are the kind of the mega trends you start off with to begin with, and you say,
Hmm.
okay, there's certain mega trends that are out there, and one of them that I knew very intimately because I ran internal, external comms and marketing was hybrid. We knew that we're in the hybrid world forever. Like I've had lots of in-person meetings. When I was at Amazon, I've never had a meeting since post-pandemic era where it didn't have a meeting invite in it to an online meeting platform. And I had a couple of meetings where like I'd show up, we'd, dust off our suits, we'd get to security, we'd spend hours walking through, and then we'd walk in the room to present to 100 people, and 95 people would be online and 5 people would be in person. So I knew that was a big mega trend. And then, I really wanted to research into the areas to see what technologies and products were out there. And I had decided early that I didn't want to take venture, at least early. So I wanted to bootstrap myself. So I had to identify approachable markets
Oh,
that
good
could
for
go
you.
after, and, things that, to your point, have some virality, because I don't want to hire a huge sales force. I want to be a PLG, product led growth kind of company. So those were my criteria going in. And really, I just came back to this problem that I had over and over again, which was I was always a field facing person doing marketing or sales, and you never know what meeting platform you're presenting on. You never know where your audience is going to be. And you need a way to be able to simplify, how you deliver multiple types of content and engage multiple types of audiences, because what we've done is we used to be a lot more engaged in meetings when we did them in person, but now we just go online and we just show a bunch of PowerPoint slides. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way, So we built Meetmoji with the intent of that, which is really, look, there, we want you to have a platform where you can present any type of slides you want, as well as videos and, demos, live demos that you could embed or click out to, include content like documents or Excel files if you need to, and engage with an audience that's in person, online, or both at the same time. So that's kind of where we started. And really our initial focus is around sales enablement, something that's near and dear to my heart that I've done since the beginning, right? So that's kind of the backstory of kind of how we ended up with Meetmoji, and then what we've been building. So right now we're got a couple hundred beta customers, and we're out there testing in the real world, delivering sales enablement sessions with companies that are in the tech world, and trying to make that easier for them and more engaging for the audience.
That's an amazing story, Brian. Maybe a couple of things that's catching my attention. Your background in sales-led companies, right? And now your focus on product-led, and the gap between these two. You're somehow are able to that cross that chasm from going from sales-led to product-led. I think for the listeners, who can go to meetmoji.com, you could also see that Brian and his team have built the sign up button, which is the first indicator of product led.
Right.
Um, so tell us your journey about, I know you said you wanted to go bootstrap your company, which means that you're not going to go take large venture capital and then spend all of that money on sales and marketing and blow that away. So how did you go about building that product, getting to that 100 customers? Sure enough, they want to try your product. Sure enough, you want to build the aha moment for them. Sure enough, you want them to share it, to a wider audience. In your case, it's the sales enablement aspect. So you want the sales engineer on the other side to be able to go and say, hey, you know what? Here's Meetmoji.
Yep.
Want to share it to his peer, and so on and so forth. Uh, could you tell us a story about how did you go about thinking through this process, building towards PLG and adding that virality so that it becomes a little more mainstay at the companies that you're selling?
Yeah, 100%. So, a lot of the motivation is because I've lived the more difficult life. On the other side, right? I did the most difficult type of selling that you'll do in enterprise software, selling into highly regulated government and classified customers around the world, and they result in really really large deals. I've done hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue with individual agencies, and but they take years and have enormous compliance requirements and huge investments. So I knew I didn't want to do that, and I knew
Hmm.
that I would have to go down the venture route if I did and raise enormous amounts of money. So I said, at the get go, like, how do we build something that's viral, product led, has network effects built into it? So part of the beauty of what you do in a platform like Meetmoji is you have one presenter and you have many people in the audience.
Hmm.
So every time that you have a single presenter and you have 100 people in the audience and they run a poll, people are going to pick up their phone, they're going to scan a QR code, and they're going to go to meetmoji.com, they're going to type in a code, and they're going to see Meetmoji, and they're going to say, oh, wow, this is a different way of being able to engage. If they just ran a poll on Zoom, I couldn't participate in it. Or, wow, that presentation was a lot smoother because people weren't
Hmm.
sharing, unsharing, resharing all the stuff, and maybe I'll check it out. So the intent from the beginning was to look. I know I have to start this flywheel myself with my personal network and founder led sales growth to knock on doors and get people to try it. But once I get the flywheel going, and you can have one person that could be getting it out to 1,000 people, and you can get a small conversion from that, it can really start the flywheel. So that was one aspect of it, is just how we engage and how we are intentional about people getting aware of the product when they're engaging with it. The second is, I want people to be able to post event, be able to do things like share a link to your entire meeting content. So all the things that you presented. So you might put that into a portal, or after a webinar, you drop it onto your website, and that links back to Meetmoji, and you're walking through a Meetmoji presentation that somebody else put together. So intention from the beginning is all about building in things that will enable network effects. Now, long term, I really see the ability to have people that are creating templates, that are agencies that are driving more usage of Meetmoji because they're creating the best templates for a sales enablement session in this industry or this product. And but short term, it's just about making sure that people are going to that, aware of it, and engaging with it, and then they can go and click sign up, right? So, but you got to get it going. It doesn't start on its own. It turns out, right? Just putting that sign up button doesn't really get you there. You gotta still do the sales led growth stuff as a founder to begin with to
Yep.
get to the PLG flywheel going.
Yeah, I think that's a big learning across the board. People have completely pivoted to either PLG or SLG, and I think now very soon they're realizing it's not an or; it has to be an and otherwise, you don't get bigger deals. You don't actually get to have a happy customer because of that sales connection, the repertoire that the sales engineer, the sales, or an AE has that with the customer, being able to go handhold them. You need SLG for that. Maybe taking a small step back, Brian, could you break us down, maybe at a conceptual level, what makes things viral, especially in the B2B world, that you're building a product towards? How can a B2B product become viral? What are the tools and techniques, or maybe some stories that you want to share about how can startup founders who are starting to build newer products, they should start thinking about, what should I build? How do I make it viral? What are the conceptual ways I can do it? How should I experiment with it? Could you throw some lights on how do you build it? How do you think about it? How do you go try it? How do you go experiment it?
Yeah, I'd say there's a bunch of different models, to go after that I explored and have looked at. I mean, there's certainly the influencer model, right? Which is
Hmm.
I become an influencer that's deep in meeting technology. I've been a presenter and doing these things on stage for 2 decades, and I know what I'm doing. So let me become an influencer on stagecraft and meeting presentations, and
Hmm.
you can do that yourself, and then people find you based on your on the things that you're sharing, right? That isn't trying to position product, but is just really about sharing knowledge. And then they trust you and like you enough to then give your product a try. I'd say, that's one. You mentioned another one earlier that I learned very well at Adobe, the freemium model, right? How do you get the most widely distributed software in the world? You give it away, and then you charge for the tools to make it on the back end. Um, I kind of chose that I didn't want to go that freemium model because I didn't want to go the venture backed way, and it is expensive. So then you have to say, okay, well, what are the other network effects that you can build in? Obviously, the most famous of which are things like Facebook and and social networks like LinkedIn, where you're building the network effects that are most strong because they identify you as a person and connect you to others in your network. But they're in the B2B world, that doesn't work the same way, right? So in the B2B world, you have to say, okay, well, what are the things that I can use? Well, if you look at the enterprise space, you and I have both been in the enterprise space a long time. The enterprise software space has changed dramatically. Like, it used to be you'd wait for the guy to knock on the door, or the lady to walk in the office, and we do a presentation, we do a demo, and people would then buy it, and you sell a $500,000 deal and an RFP bake off. Doesn't happen anymore, right? So people need to experience the product, and so you have to be able to give some sort of sample in there at least to allow people to sign up and test it out. And then you do have to think about, when you're going after the B2B world, how are you going to do it? You certainly want reference selling. So if you have good customers, incenting them like many enterprise products do to share an affiliate code or get a discount, or incent them through some sort of sales or marketing resources, that's one way. But just building in the product engagement, ways that you can engage with an outside audience, whether that's direct engagement like it is with Meetmoji, or if it's just sharing an asset or a copy or some component of your product, outside of that organization. So if you can get one or two or three, they can get you 10 or 20 or 30, and that starts to go viral, right? Virality refers to the fact that you need connections, right? So you need to find a way to build those connections between those sources, and you hope that you get enough of them. And if you have a good product, then you can get a product market fit much more rapidly. So, I mean, I landed on this, but I do think it's just about thinking through, what does your product do, and how can you build connections to other companies when that product is used, or when people talk about it, or when they share an asset that's in that, so that they'll learn about it themselves. Because people don't pick up the phone, they don't answer email, and they rarely respond to humans anymore. So they have to learn it online to kind of get anywhere. Is, I think, the truth of the law of software moving forward, enterprise or not.
Oh my goodness, Brian, you should write a book on this. Uh,
Right.
you know, okay, let me summarize what you just said because I'm just processing it in my head. You mentioned about 7 or 8 different techniques right in this 1.5 minutes time. You talked about social trust, building through influencers. And if an influencer has hundreds of millions of followers, and they talk about your product, that's been done in B2C world. It's getting done now in the B2B world. You talked about uh, sharing of assets. I think in your case, the example could be that a sales engineer, you enable one sales engineer within a company that you're selling, they will share, Meetmoji's assets, to other sales engineers within the organization itself, and you know, that brings that virality within the company that you're selling.
Yep.
So instead of you trying to go sell to the manager and talking about, hey, you know what, these are the benefits, why don't you try it? You now have created champions within the organization who have now experienced the value much before you're talking to the leadership team about, hey, you know what, you have about 300 odd folks using my product, why don't you think about bringing an enterprise license? I think that's an amazing way to put that. You also talked about a third kind, which is affiliate or partner marketing. You build partnerships, you build that community. Maybe I misunderstood on that part. Very
No,
likely
that's
that's what
100%
you meant.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it looks like, yeah, I understood that. Building partnerships, building affiliate network, who can help you now promote, not just by yourself. They can actually, promote not the goods, the services, but also they can bundle their own offerings. You mentioned about LinkedIn, whether it work or not, but you also mentioned about building champions, which is no different in the B2B world, right?
Right.
You'd go sell to like either a technical buyer or or a user, and they become a champion to the product and they start talking about it. In this case, you made them realize the value, and they have actually started using it rather than just being a superficial champion. So these are like 6 7 awesome techniques that you just mentioned on the call. So hopefully the listeners who are listening, of course we'll put this in the show notes and have these as bullet points, but this is great information, Brian.
Well, it's easy to talk about it. It's still tough to do it, right? So the theory and the practice, one of the things I saw on LinkedIn the other day was, and it really resonated with me, was there was somebody that was riding a toy horse around,
Hmm.
and the video essentially was saying this is what it's like when a non-founder is giving advice to a founder. And I put myself back there, right, in my seat at SAP when I'm investing, and I'm the guy riding the play horse, and I'm trying to teach somebody how to ride a real horse. So I think these are all really good lessons, but then applying them takes discipline, time, and practice. It's not easy. I think we all have that as a founder. You probably have it too. There's a fantasy in the back of your head that, like, if I build it and I just put that sign up button up, that maybe it'll just take off. Like, I don't know. I mean, but I've launched so many products, as of you. You know what happens when you launch a product? Nothing.
Yeah,
Absolutely nothing, right? Big company, small company, in between, nothing happens, right? You
exactly.
have to go make it happen. Although I did listen to a Calendly podcast and it sounded like it just kind of happened for him. So God bless Tope for figuring it out at Calendly, and he seemed to have a good viral model. That's a great network effect story, but yeah, it's still a lot of hard work.
Yeah, he played it down. It took him 5 years to make that happen, right? So it's not, it
Right.
just happened. Once it started happening, it started happening. So Tobe is a great guy on that front. Brian, you know, I'm talking about. I think these are like 6 or 7 techniques that you just mentioned about. How does one go about experimenting? Which one should, let's say you have limited assets, limited resources within your company. Uh, which of these techniques would you kind of recommend to the early stage startups or even slightly larger companies who are building newer product lines, but they also want to go try some of these things out? Is there a playbook around this? Is there a way to think about it?
I don't know if there's any playbook except for the playbook that says that you have a plan and you go try to violently execute against it, and then you adapt, right? I mean, here's the dirty little secret about network effects is you need a network and you need nodes to be able to make it work, right? If you have no nodes, you have no network. And so you can build as many links into your products and concepts that allow you to build that network effect, but you need nodes. And so I think identifying, early days, you just want to try to find nodes, people that will use the product, test it, understand if it works, see if it's valuable, and then you can really think about how you more deeply build out those networks, all those connections. Because until you kind of figure that out, you're not there. I mean, the story that I told you about, like with Meetmoji, you can build the presentation, you can have all your mixed media content in there, and then you can share a link afterwards. Well, I never thought about the sharing the link in the early days, but as I started to build it, I had people that were testing it and doing webinars, and then they're like, I'd love to be able to follow up asynchronously afterwards. Is there any way to be able to publish this as an asset that contains all those assets? And I said, yeah, it's a good idea. It's a great network effect thing too. but it's something that I learned from a node, an individual user who gave me a chance early because they knew me, right? And knew that I was a good sales engineer and a good person that they worked with, and so they're willing to take a chance on my product. And you need to find people like that and then learn from how they are going to apply it, because guess what, like whatever's in your head is probably wrong. um, so I think it is about just getting out there, finding those people to test it, then adapting to your network effect theories to how those nodes are using it. I think that's the best. It's not an easy answer. There is no playbook. Just jump out of the plane and do it and figure it out along the way, right?
You're right. Find the nodes. Find the nodes. That's the quest. I think maybe a small tale. Loom. I'm not sure whether
I know
you've
Loom
seen and
well.
heard
Yep,
about
of
how
course.
their virality kicked in. Loom followed a very similar playbook as Zoom, right? So they said, hey, you know what? Sharing is the right secret for building that network effect. So you could go, uh, you know, record a session all by yourself and share it to your friends and share it to your colleagues within the company, and then now have to install Loom, and they now go ahead. I'm seeing that trend across the board. Jam.dev, which was just record your screen sessions, record your Chrome browser, all the network console things. Now that's getting into the same network effect. In fact, we met with another company whose entire sole business is to allow other SaaS businesses to share. It's
All right.
wow, you can create a company. I thought it's just a feature, but now it looks like you can create a company. But this has been great chat, Brian. So a couple of things I learned from you, just to in the interest of time, find
Yep.
your node. I think find the right nodes. Maybe that's one of the advice that you've given. I think you did not say it in that particular way, but I'm trying to trivialize it just to keep it in my head. Is fake it till you make it. You mentioned about you're giving advice to, uh,
100%. Done that my
yeah,
whole career, right?
you're on the other side of the street and giving advice and shouting at them, saying that, hey, you have not done this, you have not done this, and from that advice you've learned so much, that you faked it and now you're making it. So maybe that's another way to try and experiment, figure out a way to write do the right faking, if you will.
Yes. Yeah, I
uh,
agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, I spent all my time as a sales engineer, and I moved up because I was the guy willing to try the new products, and I always failed and stumbled out the gates. So I'd always find my favorite, sales people and say, hey, let's find a friendly customer or partner to try this on. And then I remember doing one of my first presentations on web content management, and I knew nothing about web content management after we had bought this company at Adobe. And I go out there, the first thing they go is, well, how does this compare to Drupal? And I'm like, what is Drupal? Right? It's like, I mean, how little I knew. And it seems so juvenile, but I was very experienced, 15 years of experience. I knew what I was a great sales engineer. But until you bump into those things, you're never going to. So you do have to jump out, fake it till you make it, and adapt, right?
Yeah, and I think the last one is rightly mentioned. Adapt quickly. The speed and the
Yes.
agility to adapt is more important. So I know we ran out of time. Thank you so much, Brian. We learned so much from you. I'm sure the listeners would love this, to listen and know this town. I think this you should probably think about writing maybe a blog or a book or something. Talk about the various techniques about the network and viral effects. Again, to all the listeners, if you enjoyed today's discussion, please consider leaving a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This will air on Spotify, Apple, and various other podcast catchers. Your feedback makes a big difference. Stay tuned for more insights, guests, and sure enough, some more demos. Until that time, keep thriving. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Cool.